So we're in this series called A Summer with Jesus. We're thinking about really the summer before the first Easter. So kind of the final year of Jesus' ministry. We're in John 5 through 8. And we're kind of working our way through it over the summer, funnily enough. Summer with Jesus, our summer with Jesus, but really thinking about that year when things were ramping up, things were heading towards the first Easter. There's lots of things in this world we cannot ignore. Let me just mention two of them, and I'm sure when I describe them, you'll know what I mean. If you've ever been in a place, in a room, maybe a place like this, and somebody really significant comes in. It could be the leader of a country, the leader of an organization, somebody who's done something significant. I remember Joel and I were stood outside a football stadium a few months ago, and a few hundred people just standing around, and suddenly the presence of one person walking along, and everybody was focused because of all that he'd achieved a few years back. And so you kind of have this, right? Sometimes there is a person that you just cannot ignore. I was listening to someone talking about a famous person walking into the room, and they said it was like the oxygen in the room was sucked out of it. You couldn't do anything except watch. There was just an electrifying presence because this person is so significant. Hold on to that thought. That's one of the things that is really hard to ignore, the electrifying presence of somebody significant. The other thing that's really hard to ignore is when something is written to you and it is about you and it is makes a very big claim. For example, let's say you pick up your post in the morning or whenever it arrives and there's an envelope addressed to you and you don't recognize it, you open it. There's a formal letter on the inside. Across the top of the letter, you have the name and the logo of a legal company, solicitors, lawyers, whatever you want to call them. And you don't recognize the company, but it's addressed to you, dear, insert your name here, right? You recognize their name, and then you read it, and it says that they've been entrusted, whatever the legal language is, I apologize, Phil, but they've been given the charge of so-and-so's estate who passed away on such and such a date. You don't recognize the name, but they're pleased to inform you that you are the heir of £2 million. Now, what do you do with that? Like your first response is probably, this must be a practical joke, or this must be a mistake, or this must be a scam. Right? That's probably where my mind would go. £2 million, you've got to be kidding. But the one thing you don't do, even though you don't believe it, the one thing you don't do is just put it down and carry on with your day as if it's normal. Because what if it isn't? £2 million would change a few things, right? And so you probably find yourself within a few minutes on Google looking up kind of inheritance scams. You look up the company to find out if they're real lawyers, maybe get on the phone and speak to a human. You can't ignore it. You can't just let it go. If it's making a huge claim about your life, then you kind of want to know if it's true. There's two things that you can't ignore. The presence, the electrifying presence of somebody incredibly significant, and a personal claim that is written that makes a huge difference if it's true. And you see, here at Trinity, we're just a group of very ordinary people from all sorts of backgrounds who believe that both of those things have happened to us. There's a person, and we can't shake him. Right? There's a person whose presence in our thinking is electrifying. That's the person of Jesus. It's amazing when you talk to people. How many people will say, when you ask, how did you become a Christian? Well, I didn't grow up going to church, didn't like Christians, I was a bit negative, wasn't interested in Christianity, but then I read one of the Gospels, maybe John, for example, and I couldn't shake Jesus. I kept thinking there's something about Jesus. Or maybe in some parts of the world there people have a dream and Jesus is in the dream and they just can't shake the significance of who he is. And then we come to the Bible and realize that actually the claims it makes, if they are true, literally change everything. And so that's kind of who we are, right? People who've been captivated by the person of Jesus and who have been struck by the claims that the Bible makes. Now, we're in this series, John 5, 6, 7, 8. Let me just remind us kind of where we've come from, and then we'll get into chapter 7. Chapter 5 is an exciting chapter. Jesus is in Jerusalem. There's a guy who's been paralyzed 38 years, and Jesus heals him. That creates a stir. Jesus then makes a claim about his relationship with God, and then the authorities just come down on Jesus like a ton of bricks. They are ready to deal with him, and he has to defend himself. It's a great chapter. Chapter 6, you go from the dusty streets and the tensions of Jerusalem up to the gentle breezes and green meadows of Galilee. And there's this huge crowd of people, and they're hungry, and Jesus feels compassion on them, takes one packed lunch and multiplies it to feed the multitude. They are so excited. They are so blown away by this Jesus that they're like, okay, he's going to be our king. And they're ready to kind of lift him up and start singing You Are the King songs or whatever. And he kind of withdraws. He's like, no, I'm not interested. He pulls away from them. The next day, they come and find him again. And they're like, hey, Jesus. And he says, you know, the only reason you're here is because you had lunch yesterday and you want lunch today. You want a miracle meal. But I want to give you eternal life. He raises the claim. He says, look, I want to give you something incredibly much greater, infinitely much greater than just another lunch. And actually, the weird thing about chapter 6 is that as it progresses, Jesus seems to systematically drive the people away. He doesn't just kind of go along with it. By the end of it, the whole crowd has gone, and he turns to his disciples and he says, what about you guys? Do you want to go too? And Peter said, where are we going to go? Like, there's literally no one else. You are the one that has the words of eternal life. Where else can we go? They were a small group of very ordinary people, but they watched Jesus and they were gripped by who he was. Just had a message from Tim. Those of you that have been around Trinity, you'll recognize that we've been praying for somebody in North Africa who became a Christian. And then she told her family, and her family just went crazy. Grandmother screaming, everyone shouting, that kind of thing. And so she kind of left and she stayed with an aunt. The aunt couldn't believe that she'd actually told her family. The disgrace, the shame, she's following Jesus, she's a Christian. Tim just sent a message around a little while ago that she's gone back home. And she said, grandmother's still screaming and everybody's still shouting. They're all saying, we can't accept you as a Christian. It's just a horrifying scene. But she says, I'm hanging in here. I'm being patient in this because if they could just see Jesus the way I've seen Jesus, if they could just know Jesus, they would understand why I'm willing to risk everything for him. Now, we're here in John chapter 7. And let me be honest with you, as a preacher, when we lay out a series of messages, when you're working through a text like this, you kind of break it down and you look at them, and I look at them and think, really looking forward to that one. Like that bit there, that's going to be great. And oh yeah, I definitely want to try and get that one. And oh, I really want that one, but actually, no, I can't do that one. But I'm really glad Andy gets to do that one. And you know, you kind of have this sort of whoa about various passages. And then there's a few in there where you kind of go, not sure what we're going to say about that one. And to be honest, that's what this week's passage is. There's no real action. There's no like, whoa moment. There's no, oh my goodness, that's incredible. There's no like famous verse. It almost, dare I say it, it's almost a bit like filler. Like we've got to kind of get through this, but a few days ago I was looking at it thinking, can I combine that? Right? Can I combine that with the following week and just shrink the series? Because even though it's quite a chunk of verses, not convinced, but here's the thing, before you decide to leave, here's the thing. As I've studied it and looked at it, I've realized actually I cannot think of a passage that could be more relevant to us in this country, in this year, at this time, to us gathered in this village hall on this particular date, to us as a church, wherever we are. We need what this passage is going to say. So actually, I'm quite excited now, and I hope you are as well. So let's look at it. John chapter 7, starting at verse 1. And I'll kind of read a bit and explain a bit so we can get into it. So chapter 5, he's in Jerusalem. Chapter 6, he's back up north in Galilee. After this, Jesus went about in Galilee. He would not go about in Judea because the Jews in Judea were seeking to kill him. Okay, so up north, he's popular. Down south, he's in trouble. He's got to be careful. Now, verse 2, the Jews' feast of booths was at hand. Now, the Jews had these feasts throughout the year, right? Some of them we're probably familiar with. Passover, you've probably heard of it. Pentecost, you've probably heard of it. The other big one was this one, the Feast of Booths, Feast of Tabernacles, it's also called. It comes in the autumn, so really we're kind of skipping from spring right the way over to early October. And it's the one that the Jews enjoyed the most. Basically, it was like a 7-day party. They'd build these booths, they'd sit in them, they'd have their meals in them, they'd enjoy kind of hanging out with one another, not working. It's kind of like a lockdown minus social distancing. So it was a total win for the Jews. And people had to travel to Jerusalem, so the place was heaving, all the fast food, the falafel everywhere. I mean, it was amazing, and they loved it. And the Feast of Booths is at hand, and Jesus needs to be going. He's a Jewish male. He's sort of required to be there. Now, verse 3, it says, so his brothers said to him, like that's literal brothers. We know he's got 4, same mother, different father, half brothers. His brothers said to him, leave here and go to Judea, that your disciples also may see the works you are doing. For no one works in secret if he seeks to be known openly. If you do these things, show yourself to the world, for not even his brothers believed in him. So there's kind of a sarcasm to what they're saying. It's interesting that they've seen him do miracles. They know he's doing miracles, but they don't believe in the significance of the miracles. They're not denying them. They just don't believe that he is who he claims to be. Probably wouldn't, would you, if it's your brother? And so they're like, hey, Jesus, the stage is set. Go south, the young man. I mean, he's older than them, but go south. Come on, this is your moment. I mean, think about it, Jesus. You're doing these kind of like impressive things up here in Galilee. Why don't you go down to Jerusalem? They're setting the stage right now. Israel's got talent. They've got the judges, like they've got the lights. You do one of these tricks that you do down there, it's going to go crazy. Jesus, you could get the golden buzzer. There'll be like foil everywhere. It's going to be the biggest thing ever. You can almost imagine them, can't you? Kind of winding him up. Like, go on, Jesus. Stop hiding. Show yourself. But they didn't believe in him. And Jesus isn't captivated. He wasn't in chapter 6 by fame and popularity. He lost a crowd that wanted him to be king. He's not going to go for this. Notice what he says, verse 6. Jesus said to them, my time has not yet come, but your time is always here. The world cannot hate you, but it hates me because I testify about it that its works are evil. You go up to the feast. I am not going up to this feast, for my time has not yet fully come. After saying this, he remained in Galilee. I think it's quite interesting what Jesus says there. Talking about time, he keeps talking about time all the way through John, that there's an appointed time. Something's going to happen when that time comes. This is not that time. That time is the next Passover. That's still to come. But notice he starts talking about the world hating him. That's kind of weird when 1 minute people are saying, come on, you're popular, you could be super popular. But his response is, the world hates me. Why does he say the world hates him? Because I testify about it that its works are evil. Now, Christians have a reputation for testifying about the world that its works are evil, right? That's what the world thinks of us, that we walk around tut-tutting and, wagging fingers at everything. Jesus wasn't really like that. There are times where he would confront things and say some really strong and daring things, but often you'll find in the Gospels that he actually does something good and gets a hate reaction. Like he'd come in and heal somebody whose life is being ruined by demonic oppression, and then everyone will say, get out of here, we don't want you here. When he first met the disciples and gave Peter a miraculous catch of fish, Peter's response was, get away from me. There's something about Jesus that sort of repels the world. He's not going for popularity. He's like the polar opposite to something in this world. And so it's kind of clear, I'm not going up to this feast. Then you get to verse 10, and it gets a little bit awkward. Because he says, the writer says, but after his brothers had gone up to the feast, then he also went up. Not publicly, but in private. Now, we've got to ask the question, did Jesus just tell a lie? Right? It kind of sounds like it, doesn't it? I'm not going up to this feast. No, fingers crossed, right? I don't think so. I think the whole context of what he's been asked, it could be that he changed his mind. He wasn't planning to, and then he changed his mind. I don't think that. I think the whole context of their question was, come on, Jesus, we want to pick you up on our shoulders and you can arrive waving and do some stuff, right? And they're kind of setting him up, and he says, no, I am not going up to the feast. Not implied, not this way. You go on up. I'm not interested in what you're offering. Once they've gone, I don't know how he kind of went up in private, like a face mask or something. Right, that'd be appropriate, wouldn't it, these days? So, some kind of like Jewish face mask. He kind of heads on up to Jerusalem. I don't personally feel that this proves that Jesus sinned and, the whole gospel comes falling to the ground. I think in context it must make sense that he wasn't being tricky or wrong. He just wasn't playing their game. He wasn't into the popularity context. Verse 11, the Jews were looking for him at the feast, saying, where is he? And there was much muttering about him, twittering, if you will, among the people. While some said, he is a good man, others said, no, he is leading the people astray. Yet for fear of the Jews, no one spoke openly about him. So you can kind of picture it, right? Jerusalem's heaving with people. Thousands of people, and under their breath, they're all talking about Jesus. Where is he? Where is he? I want to see him. Did you hear what he did? I heard what he did. But were you there? No, I wasn't there, but I've heard about it. And they're going on about Jesus because 6 months before, he healed the man who had been paralyzed 38 years, and he did it on a Sabbath, and he got in trouble. Right? So that's the context. And you know what I find fascinating about this? Is that just as I'm reading this, I'm thinking, the world hates Jesus, and he stirs people up just by existing. Suddenly I stop and I think, you know what? Nothing's changed. The world still hates Jesus now. It makes no sense. An obscure, untrained peasant, effectively, that wandered around and taught some stories about fishing and farming in the Middle East 2,000 years ago. Why does he matter? And yet there's something about Jesus that today just puts people's backs up. You can talk to people about religion. They're fine with that. Spirituality is in. You can talk about church. They think you're weird, but it's okay. It's irrelevant to them. You can talk about God. Everyone's got their own view of God anyway, but the moment Jesus comes into the conversation, things get decidedly frosty. Why is that? Why does he matter so much? What is it about Jesus that on the one hand can so captivate someone like that lady we're praying for in North Africa that she's willing to risk everything, potentially death at the hands of her family, because she's so captivated by him, and at the same time some people in Chippenham can get bent out of shape if you dare to mention Jesus? He really does stir people up. And so let's read the next bit, from verse 14 down to 24, because this is really the kind of the moment that we're going to look at today. All right, this is where Jesus really gets speaking, and we're going to see what he has to say. I may add a comment or two to make sense of it as we go, but about the middle of the feast, so halfway through the week, Jesus went up into the temple and began teaching. The Jews therefore marveled, saying, how is it that this man has learning when he has never studied? Not been to university, he's not got a famous teacher, he's a nobody, but his teaching is really impressive. Okay, so he's getting a response. So Jesus answered them, my teaching is not mine, but his who sent me. If anyone's will is to do God's will, he will know whether the teaching is from God or whether I am speaking on my own authority. The one who speaks on his own authority seeks his own glory, but the one who seeks the glory of him who sent him is true, and in him there is no falsehood. Has not Moses given you the law? Yet none of you keeps the law. Why do you seek to kill me?" The crowd answered, "You have a demon. Who is seeking to kill you?" You can start collecting insults in John, because basically for the rest of this series there's going to be almost a classic insult every single week. Don't use this at home. Children, do not say this to your sibling. But the crowd's response to Jesus: "You're crazy. You've got a demon. Who's trying to kill you?" But Jesus goes straight on. Where am I? Verse 21. Jesus answered them, "I did one work, and you all marvel at it. Moses gave you circumcision," not that it's from Moses, but from the fathers, "and you circumcise a man on the Sabbath. If on the Sabbath a man receives circumcision, so that the law of Moses may not be broken, are you angry with me because on the Sabbath I made a man's whole body well?" He's still talking about John 5, 6 months ago. That thing that he did. And what he's saying here, just a little bit of background, for the Jews, the Sabbath, you probably know this, right? They don't work. You must not work on the Sabbath. And that's what caused the problem, was that Jesus had done a work on the Sabbath. But there were some things that were more important than the Sabbath. For example, if you gave birth to a boy on a Sabbath, there's a 1 in 7 chance of that happening, right? So if you gave birth to a boy on the Sabbath and you were Jewish, the 8th day would also be a Sabbath, and you had to get him circumcised on the 8th day if you're going to obey the rules. And so that was allowed on the Sabbath. And the logic was that that little procedure was kind of a ritual purity thing. It's for his good. And Jesus is saying, well, if you do that on a Sabbath, just a little procedure, let's not think about it too long, it's bringing tears to my eyes, but just that little, you'll do that. Why have you got a problem that I made a man's whole body well on a Sabbath? It's the same principle. Why wouldn't I? He was needing it, so I did it. That's his logic. But what he's saying is, why are you so angry with me? And then verse 24, and if there's a verse that we're going to camp on today, really it's verse 24. Jesus said, "Do not judge by appearances, but judge with right judgment." What he's saying is, investigate me. Obviously, he's stirred the crowd. Everybody's talking, right? Everybody is upset one way or another about him. And what is he saying? He's saying, look into it. Don't judge superficially. We all hate being judged superficially, right? It's just annoying when people think they know us because of our height or because of our clothing or something superficial. Jesus is saying, no. Don't judge me based on superficial stuff. Judge with right judgment. Look into this. Find out who I am. Check this out. And here we are 2 millennia later, and I think Jesus is still saying the same thing. If you find that Jesus gets into your mind and it's like you can't think about anything else and he's just there, you keep thinking about him. If you find yourself continually coming back and going, I don't know what it is, it makes no sense, but I can't shake the fact that Jesus is in my mind, it's like he's here. If that's where you're at, Jesus says, investigate. Check it out. Find out who I am. See if this is true. It reminds me of an incident later, the following spring, when Jesus goes to Jerusalem and he's tried and crucified, hung on the cross to die, and spends the 6 hours hanging there, dying all the mission that God had given him to do. He dies on the cross, then he's taken down, he's buried in the tomb, and on the 3rd day, on the Easter Sunday morning, Jesus rose from the dead, and then he starts meeting with his disciples, which must have been awesome. And that evening, 10 of them are gathered together behind closed doors, and Jesus comes and stands in the midst of them. And they're like, whoa, he really is alive. And they're blown away. Like, this changes everything. Which it does, right? If Jesus conquered death, that really does change everything. But one of them was missing, Thomas. And so they found Thomas later and they said, Tom, listen, Jesus, he was with us. You missed out. You shouldn't have gone for that falafel, whatever, you should have been there. And Thomas says, unless I see with my own eyes and put my fingers into the nail prints on his hands and put my hand into his side where the spear was thrust, unless I touch and check it out for myself, I will not believe. The next Sunday comes, and there's 11 of them behind closed doors, and Jesus came and stood in the midst of them, and he fixed his gaze on Thomas. Thomas, what does he say to him? You fool, you should have believed. Call yourself a follower of Jesus. You're supposed to be faithful. I mean, he doesn't criticize him. He invites him. He says, come on, touch. Put your fingers right here. Touch, feel the holes. Put your hand here. I want you to check this out. Investigate if it's true. And Thomas's response is beautiful. It's like he just collapses before him and says, my Lord and my God, because the resurrection changes everything. But I think it's really important that Jesus said to him, check the evidence. You see, God is not against us researching. He's not against us checking the evidence. He wants us. If Jesus kind of captivates us and we start to wonder what's going on, check it out, find out, look into it. There's nothing that's being hidden. There's nothing that you're supposed to sort of leap in the dark and believe even though it seems crazy. It's like, check it out for yourself. The history, the evidence, the written records, the eyewitness documents. Just investigate Jesus. He's that important. In fact, I want to mention 4 things from this passage that we've looked at in John 7. 4 things that I think all of us should investigate about Jesus. Things to ponder, to pray about if you do that. Things to read the Bible and think about, but also read other stuff. Ask people, get out there and investigate these 4 things about Jesus. Number 1, why does the world hate Jesus so much? That's worth pondering. It makes no sense. Like, I don't go down the street in Chippenham or go get my hair cut or, chat to somebody in the market or something and find that they get really worked up if I mention, some random person. If I happen to mention that I knew a chap in Italy years ago and his name was Franco, they don't go, and go crazy about it. Like, there's no reaction. If I say I was reading this book about Julius Caesar, they don't go, oh, Julius Caesar, I hate him. But when Jesus comes up, there's a reaction. Why is that? I wonder if maybe the reason for that is what he says in verse 7. The reason the world hates me is because I testify against it that its works are evil. I wonder if maybe that's a good thing. I mean, let's face it, we look at the world and we're not thrilled, are we? Or you look around and you watch the news, or you look at your neighborhood and you just think, what's going on? COVID, what's going on with this? Why are so many people dying? Why are there second spikes in certain places? What's happening? This is a mess. And then you see crime and you see the protests and you see injustices and you see all the stuff that's going on. Surely you don't go through a week thinking this world is awesome, right? You watch the news, don't you, and think, oh, there's a lot of stuff I don't like about this world. And if there's a lot of stuff that you don't like about this world, and this world hates Jesus, it's worth knowing why. What is it about him that is like water and oil to the value system of this world? What is it about this obscure person from history that gets a reaction all across the globe, even today? Investigate it, check it out, try to figure it out for yourself. The second thing that I think we should investigate comes in verses 16 and 17, where Jesus makes the bold claim that when he teaches, the words he's teaching have been sent from God, that he is sent by God, and that his message has come from God. That's a massive claim, isn't it? For the past 2,000 years, the words of Jesus have been translated into thousands of languages and taken to all the corners of the world. Right? And for the past 2,000 years, the words of Jesus have been burned and banned and banished and destroyed, and they've been withheld from people, and people have done everything they can to stop people getting to those words, and yet those words have continued to change lives. Let me just pause and paint a picture. I read an illustration from Tim Keller that I really appreciated. He said, imagine this big mansion, beautiful house, and it's got one of those really impressive front doors, and for some reason you really want to go inside to see it, but the door is locked, firmly locked. There's no budging it. But as you're stood there trying to open this door, you look down and on the doormat and on the step, the porch, the stairs down to the path back to the road, the lawn on both sides, you see hundreds and hundreds of keys just scattered everywhere. And because you want to get into the house, you pick up a key and hopefully try it in the lock and won't even go in. So you discard it and you take another. This one goes in, but it won't turn no matter how hard you try. So you discard it and you just keep trying. You're obsessed. You want to get into this house. And you work your way through 50, 100, 200, 300 keys. And finally, you take a key and you put it in and it goes in smoothly and it turns smoothly. And the door opens like the easiest thing ever. What do you think in that moment? Do you think to yourself, what a coincidence. What a coincidence that there happens to be a key that by accident works on this door. No, you don't. You say, this is the key, all right? This one is the key. This is the key made by that locksmith to open that lock. It's absolutely, definitely the right key. No coincidence, no accidents. It's the same designer. Now back to the story of Jesus. Why is it that all across the world for 2,000 years, the words of a obscure, uneducated carpenter come kind of public teacher, sort of a rabbi but not officially, how is it that his words, translated into all these different languages, are so effective in people's lives? Makes no sense. Why is it that there are people in Japan and Korea and China and Singapore, the Far East, that read the words of Jesus and it just resonates 2,000 years later, totally different culture? And what about tribes in Borneo or in Papua New Guinea or Indonesia or people in Australia? What about the people in Africa, maybe animists that are used to worshipping ancestors, and then they get the words of Jesus and it just, whoa, it transforms. People in South America, North America, Europe, people with no education, people with the highest education, people raised Buddhist, people raised Muslim, people raised Hindu, people raised ardent atheist, people who worship ancestors, people who worship animals, people who worship science, people who worship pop stars. Across the world, old and young, male and female, every color of skin, people read about Jesus and they discover that he is the key that unlocks their heart, that unlocks reality, that unlocks everything for them. How's that possible? Coincidence? I kind of don't think so. Jesus is the key because Jesus brings the message from the Creator who made us. We need to investigate that, to see if that's really the case. Investigate what he says. Number 3, drop down to verse 18. And Jesus says something quite bold here. He says, the one who seeks the glory of him who sent him is true, and in him there is no falsehood. Investigate the fact that there is no falsehood in Jesus. Please don't make the mistake of evaluating Christianity by evaluating Christians. All right, that we do not stand up to scrutiny. You start digging around in my heart or in anybody else's life and you'll find junk, you'll find muck, you'll find the same kind of rubbish you find everywhere else. But Christianity shouldn't be evaluated based on Christians. We're sinners and we hold our hands up to that. But investigate Jesus and you'll find somebody who genuinely, legitimately has no falsehood in him. Not a hint of a false motive, not a hint of anything inappropriate about him, just absolutely, radically pure. It's beautiful. It's worth investigating just to discover how amazingly pure he is, no falsehood whatsoever. And so we investigate, why does the world hate him so much? What is it about Jesus that stirs such a reaction? Number 2, does he really bring the message from God? Are his words literally the words of our Creator, our designer? Does his word unlock us like the perfect key? Investigate his morality, his ethics, his life, his lifestyle. Investigate to see, is Jesus really pure with no falsehood? Because that's a huge claim to make. And then number 4, verses 23 and 24, Jesus draws their attention to the fact that he had made a life whole, fixed a body. And when Jesus was saying this, it was 6 months-ish after he'd done it. He was inviting them to investigate. If you weren't here in the spring, go look for the guy. Everybody knows who he is. He was there for 38 years. He was kind of famous. Like, people knew him. You go find him now. Where are you going to find him? Probably down in the Kidron Valley, kicking a ball around with some boys or something, like enjoying his legs. Go and investigate him. Now, we can't do that. The guy is long since gone. But we can investigate when Jesus changes the lives of people around us. Maybe you've known that. Somebody that you know really well. You know their weaknesses, and you know their brokenness, and you know the kind of mess that they were. But something happened. And they're not perfect. No one's claiming perfection, but they're kinder than they used to be. They don't swear like they used to, or they don't lie like was second nature before. There's something different about this person. And it's not education, it's not just growing up, it's something different. Investigate how Jesus changes lives. You see, Jesus is inviting them not to judge him superficially, but because he has stirred them so much, he's inviting them to judge him with right judgment. Why does the world hate him? Investigate it. Is his message the key that unlocks everything? Investigate it, read it, ponder it, think about it. Is Jesus actually genuinely true? Is he genuinely zero falsehood? Is he really pure? That massively matters. And number 4, investigate how Jesus changes lives. When Jesus heals someone, do they find themselves 2 weeks later back on their mat because it didn't really take? Or does Jesus get a hold of a life and really change it slowly, methodically, from the inside out? That's our experience. And we've by no means arrived. In no sense are we there. There's still so much that causes us concern about ourselves. But at the same time, Jesus has captivated our hearts. And the claims that he makes in his word have so stirred us that we've thought, we've got to find out if this is true. Because if this is true, this changes everything. And maybe we haven't investigated those specific things, but I'd encourage you to. I'd encourage you to investigate it if you've never even thought about these things before, and it's all like, whoa, this is weird. I just encourage you, and my prayer would be that Jesus would kind of be that electrifying presence that you just can't shake the thought, so that you investigate and find out for yourself. But even for those of us that have known him and followed him for decades, one of the things that maybe we need to be wary of is that Jesus grows familiar. In a bad sense, like he becomes normal, like a shadow, and we stop noticing. And maybe we think of Jesus more on Sundays, but less on the rest of the week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. In normal life, we just kind of get on with it. Maybe we need to be reminded from John 7:24, don't judge him superficially, but judge him with right judgment. Investigate this man who has so radically rocked this world that to this day, he remains the most controversial figure. And yet for people like that lady in North Africa and like us here today, he remains the one that we're ready to live for and if necessary to die for. Not because we're great, pro-martyr types, but because we're just following the one who died for us. We're following the one who's lived up to every claim. And I think every one of us would do well to slow down a little bit in life and to fix our gaze on Jesus and to investigate and to allow him to become as significant as he should be. Maybe for the first time, maybe for the umpteenth time, but let's let Jesus rock our worlds and be who he is for us.